and welcome back to another week of Dear Piggy's Java tutorials. So we've been taking a little bit of a break, and I'm so happy that we're finally moving on from Intro to Java. So the rest of these videos will be Intermediate Java, which means we've moved up a level and we're going to start to get into a little bit harder stuff. So I hope all of you guys will enjoy these videos as much as you did with our intro videos, and I'm sure we'll have lots and lots of fun together. So for our first intermediate Java lesson, we started with try, catch, and error handling because I know we learned that for our intro videos and I think we might have needed a little bit of a refresher. So that was the previous video, go check it out. Well, we're going to start with now our methods. So we've officially moved on to harder stuff. We're going to learn how to create our own methods. So prior to our intermediate course, everything we've done has been hard-coded into Java. So every single function that we used, we never created our own. We went and we used something from a Java library. So now what we're going to do is we are going to create our own functions so we can tell them to do whatever we want. Okay, so basically, a Java method is a collection of statements that are grouped together to form an operation. Now, I guess that was a pretty clear definition, but if you really wanted to use the easy way, then Java methods are functions. So methods, functions, I'll use both names interchangeably. Just know that they're pretty much the same thing. So yeah, methods are functions. One thing that's great about functions, again, in all languages, you write them once, so you create them once, you can call them anywhere. You use them anywhere, as many times as you want. Okay, now a few things that we need to have in our functions that are kind of required. We're going to need the keyword static. We're going to need a return type, whether it's int or void or string. We're going to need a name for our function, and we're going to need parameters. Now, parameters can be optional. You don't have to have parameters. We'll get into more of that in our next video. So this video is going to be working on, again, explaining what static is, creating our first simple function that does not return anything and just prints things out and no parameters. Okay, so let's jump right in. I'm going to go to Replit, which is our in-browser IDE, start coding, log in here. Okay, so the first thing that I mentioned that we're going to do is talk about the keyword static. Now, static and keywords like this are pretty complicated. I don't know if we're quite there yet, but I'm going to give you guys a basic overview just so we understand what we're going for. And static and things like this have to do a lot with classes. So when we talk about classes, I will definitely explain in lots of detail what all of this means, okay? But for now, we'll just do a brief overview and know that if you don't completely understand what I'm talking about here, it's perfectly okay because we'll talk about them more in, I guess, two or three weeks. Okay, so when we create our method, we start off with static, then we give some sort of return type. Now, obviously, don't type what I did, but I'm just saying static return type, my func. So give your function a name, and then parentheses. Then curly braces, and in the curly braces here, you're going to be writing your code. Oops, now I remembered something. We do not write our functions inside of this main function. So if you look closely here, guys, this is a function. So before, we've been writing everything in our main function, in our main class. So now, when we're creating our own function, we're going to come out of the main function, but still write it in the class. So notice, we're not in this main function anymore, but we're still in this gigantic main class. Okay, so this is really, really important to remember. Once we write our function outside of the main function, we can then go in and call it in the main function. So, a little bit confusing, but to sum it up, we write and create our functions outside of this main part. And when we call our functions, we go inside of this main function to call it. Now, back to our static keyword. So when we create a method, the word static means that the method belongs to the main class and not an object of the main class. Okay, so static, by using the keyword static, it's basically saying that this only belongs to the class that I've created it in and not any object that comes after. Okay, a little confusing, I know. If you want to, go back, watch my whole explanation again, but we will talk about objects and classes later. Okay, so now that we've gotten the tough part down, let's talk about our return types. We know what static is, now we need a return type. So there are many common return types. We are going to be working with two common ones, int and void. Now, I think return types are easy to understand, and here's why. Because basically, we're just looking for one keyword, and that keyword is return. Sometimes when we take in parameters, we'll be able to return something, and we'll talk about this in our next video. But say when we're calling our method here, when we're running our function, we're going to give it two things, two numbers, say. And then what we're going to do in the function is we're going to add those two numbers together and print out the result. So in this case, we would be returning the sum. So we would use the return keyword. We would return sum. However, some functions, like this one in my picture here, you don't use the return keyword anywhere. You are printing things out. You don't return anything. So basically, if you do not use the return keyword, so if you don't see the return keyword anywhere in your function, then you would use void as your return type. So in this case, static void, because I'm not using the return keyword. If you were to return an integer, now this is the data type of whatever you're returning. So the sum would be an integer, then you would do static int because you're returning an integer. Another example, if you were return name, name would be a string, then you would do static string. So this all has to do with the data type or whether or not you're actually returning something. So again, return type, just look for your keyword return. We will talk about that a lot more. You'll see this a lot more in our next video when we take parameters. And then method name, parentheses. We're just going to leave our parentheses empty for now for our methods, and next video we'll start adding stuff. So for now, I just want to do something really simple, and we're just going to print some lines out. So since we're just printing some lines out, I'm not returning anything, so I would use the keyword void because I don't have the return keyword. All I'm doing is using a series of system.out.println. So system.out.println, and again, when you would actually have return type is when I would return var name. That would be an example of when you would need to not use void. But since I'm just doing system.out.println here, I can return void. I don't have to return anything. So system.out.println, look at me. We've printed many lines. Hello there. Hello there. Let's run this many times. All right. Okay, so we have our first function. Static means that my func only belongs to the main class and not any object of the main class. Then I said void because I only use print lines and no returns. So once we've created it, let's go run it. Remember at the beginning, this is not created inside of our main function. We call it inside of the main function. Now, how do we call it? We call it by using the name and the parentheses. So my func is the name, parentheses, then I put a semicolon. That's it. I've run my code. So now, let's run this. So let's wait. So it should give us 2 lines out. And you might be asking, there we go. It's printed out my 2 lines. You might be asking, why do I need to create a method? Well, it's easy if I only run this once. I could just print it out. But if I were to run this, say like 3 times, that would be rather hard to print all these lines 3 times, right? Instead, I just call it 3 times in my code, and it's going to get printed out 3 times in a row. Okay, so congrats guys. We've created our first method, we've run it. We've learned about the static keyword, which is still confusing. I get it, but it's okay. I'm sure we'll understand it more as we get on to classes and objects. And then we learned about return types. So what are we returning? What is coming out of the function? and we learned where we should create and where we should run our functions. Okay, so next video, we're going to be taking in parameters. So we're going to be manipulating our methods a little bit more and actually doing some fun stuff that changes every time we run our function. Okay, so I'll see you then. Bye, guys.